On this. Thank you. So, hi everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to have a conversation about teaching qualitative research equitably. So, this has been a topic that a lot of people have asked me. Hey, Lauren, good to see you. A lot of people have asked me to talk about, and I also get invited as guest speakers in different universities to train people on teaching qualitative research equitably. So I wondered, if there's a lot of people that are in my orbit that teach qualitative research, and I have been teaching it for a good 22 years by now, so I have stuff to share. And so I thought I might just share with you if it is of interest. So I also like to have very transparent ways of doing these kind of conversations. Those of you who are joining us a little late, please know that I'm welcoming you, inviting you, humbly requesting you to come on camera if you can. If you cannot, that's okay. But seeing your face is really helpful because then I get to see whether you're frowning at me, side-eyeing me, smiling, because then I know how my information is landing on you. So, humble request, please come on camera if you can. Okay, so why am I doing this? This is a question a lot of people ask me a lot of times. Why are you doing this? You're giving away stuff that you get paid to do. Two reasons. Two reasons is why I'm doing this. First is because even if I get paid to do whatever it is I know, I am not going to be able to share everything I know in whatever assignments I have with people. And I want to share because I want to help people have some information that I didn't have. And then there's a second one, and the second one is transactional. I have some mentoring programs that I offer, and I will share some information about those programs with you so that if you or you know somebody who might be interested or might benefit from it, then you also have that information as well. You're not obligated to, but it's an invitation to consider if it's something you would want to do a little bit more deeper work with me. Then there are some other options. But even if you didn't, the information will still be very useful. Okay, with that being said, let me introduce myself because I think some of you know me and some of you don't. So those of you who do know me, I apologize because you're going to hear things that you have heard before. Those of you don't know me, I need to because I'm a qualitative researcher. I have to situate myself. So my name is Bhattacharya. I have been teaching qualitative research since 2000, I want to say. As a graduate student, my graduate assistantship was a qualitative research methods consultant for the College of Education at the University of Georgia. At that time, we had a PhD in qualitative research, which was housed in educational psychology in the program called Research Evaluation and Measurement. Then the EdSci Quant boys and the Qual women got into quarrel because they always have been fighting. And the program got split. We still were able to graduate with a PhD in qualitative research, but at that time it was sort of a program one of its kind. University of Georgia now have reignited that, and it has now a PhD program in qualitative research. However, it's online and maybe in person, but definitely online. But I like to claim that we were the OGs of the program. So I graduate from University of Georgia. I currently work at University of Florida, similar department, research evaluation and measurement, and I teach qualitative research methods classes. I have been teaching qualitative research methods classes in various universities, R1, R2, doctoral universities, different types of universities, and it has really given me newfound insights every time I teach qualitative research classes. In some spaces, I've had very very sort of fluid way of how the research courses fit into people's program of study. And in other places, mine is the only qual class people are supposed to take, and they're supposed to learn everything in this one qual class, everything. Philosophy, theory, design, data collection, data analysis, and writing it all up in one class, one go, let's go. And I am not joking. It is the expectation. In one class, you get to have all of it, and then you should be able to do your dissertation at that. So, teaching has not just been about teaching, it has been navigating higher ed politics as well, so anyway, so that is my background. I have taught intro qual, advanced qual, data analysis qual, narrative analysis qual, arts-based analysis qual, different types of seminars and reading classes as well, writing up qualitative research, bunch of different types of qual classes. In my own program, if you could think of qual, a course in qual, I had taken it because UGA was one of those places that was like a qualotopia. So any kind of qual you wanted to take, there was somebody teaching it. You want to take arts-based qual, somebody's teaching it. You want to take postmodern qual, somebody's teaching it. You want to take feminist methodology, somebody's teaching it. You want to take arts-based methodology, somebody's teaching it. You want to go deep into phenomenology, go for it. So there was just so much option. And then I come into the world and I realize like other people are not going to have that level of exposure that I've had. They're only going to have 1 3-credit hour course, maybe 2 if I'm lucky, and they're still supposed to do a qualitative dissertation out of that. So that is my background. That is where I am coming from. And today I'm going to share a little bit about my experience, but I do want to open it up for questions so that I don't talk didactically, because I really thrive when you ask questions. So I want you to ask questions like, whatever comes up for you, please ask questions so I'm able to respond to you and be much more customized in what we're doing. Okay, so the first thing that I had to think about when I began thinking about teaching qual, hi Varaxi, when I thought about teaching qual was I went from University of Georgia to University of Memphis as my first teaching class, first assistant professor appointment. And those of you who have been in R1 or deal with R1 nonsense, you probably already know that R1 teaches you to be a little bit of a snob, and so if you graduate from R1, you get taught, you either go lateral in the same type of institution or you go higher. That's what you're taught. If you don't do that, you're seen as somewhat of a failure. And I considered myself that when I got the job at University of Memphis. The methodology position as qual methodologist, there weren't that many that back then. There's still not that many now. So you go where the job is, and so that's what I did. And I still felt like maybe this wasn't like the best professional enrichment situation for me. Memphis was primarily Black, so a lot of my students were Black, but you couldn't tell if you looked at the university. The university looked fairly white, even though the town was, 60% Black. So one day I was teaching my qual class, and one of my students asked me, and I've written about it, so this is common knowledge now for people who have read my work. So one of my students asked me, Memphis is 60% Black, and the white man still signs our paycheck. So what will your Deleuze, Guattari, Foucault do for us? And it was such a profound question where, you remember like your life before that moment and your life after that moment. That was one of those defining moments type of question. And I had an answer if I could answer it, but I knew that that's not what they're saying to me, what they are communicating with me with high risk to themselves, because the person who raised that question is also having to navigate the risk of having a target from me on their back, and so it's a very high risk question. So how I received the question was, you're not seeing us. You're teaching us from a perspective that is not resonant with us, that is not culturally situated, and we have to now draw this bridge between where we are and what you're teaching us, but you're not seeing us. That's what they're really, well, at least that's how I received the message. You're not seeing us. And it's a heavy message. It's a powerful one. It's one that I am super grateful for. But at that time I had an existential crisis, and I'm like, I am teaching the way I have been taught. And the way I was taught was from people who were lesbian women, who had a critical stance. So had like a liberal, critical, white, lesbian perspective, in terms of my interrogation. And that's not necessarily wrong or bad, but I needed more. It wasn't like a bad perspective, or I'm not pathologizing that perspective, but I needed more. And I needed to understand, how do I work with people that who has other knowledge systems, and I am trying to like take that away or not make rooms for that in the classroom, and like try to widgetize them with whatever I think is the canon, and so that is the question I ask myself. And since then I have been unlearning, like, so the journey of unlearning had started then, and I'd been unlearning. So the first thing I did in this unlearning process is I began to think of course, the readings. What readings are you offering in the class? So I diversified my readings. Now, we have a lot more folks now who are writing qualitative research books from critical perspectives, different critical perspectives, decolonial perspectives, anti-racist, anti-oppressive perspectives. Back then, there wasn't that many. We still need a lot more work to do. We still do, because qualitative research is generated from US, UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia primarily. And so the primary texts out of these spaces are written by white folks. And that doesn't mean that the texts are bad, but it also means that there is a certain amount of whiteness that is entangled in those writing. And so when folks look for culturally situated critical work, sometimes that's super hard to find, because there's not that many folks. So I just started like really looking for papers, texts, chapters, whatever I could to diversify my reading. Then, as the years went on, I realized that the pressure, like higher ed pressure, was getting to be so much that being asked to teach so much in one class, I ended up saying, fine, if this is your required, it's required, but I'm going to continue to offer optional courses for folks anyway. Like, that's my load. And I never had a problem making my load. People would come, because if you do your job well in the first class, whatever it is you're teaching, that everybody needs it, folks were coming and taking second and third class, even if that didn't count in their program of study with me, just because they were hungry to learn, and people were underestimating that hunger, basically. Somebody said something, please, right? Can I recommend Tyson Young Percent talk, How Indigenous Thinking? Well, yes, absolutely. Thank you for Nicola for recommending things. So so basically, at that point, I started thinking about, what are some big ideas that I want to have an understanding of by the time people finish the class. So this is way different than objectives. So for example, let me see if I can pull up the syllabus. Especially when I pull up the syllabus, then I can kind of show you. Share screen. All right, so this was my syllabus for a previous like introductory qual class. And so you will see, like, I have 4 big ideas, and they're different from like student like learning objectives. They're a little bit different from us. And basically, let's see, my syllabus is like longer than a paper. But I put everything in it so I can say it is in the syllabus. Okay, so this was one of my biggest idea: trigger the authentic inquirer within. What is the truth of our being? Why should we care about others? What is it that we want to know passionately? I wanted people to have an understanding of these ideas and be able to answer these questions. So this isn't like, oh, they would be able to do this task and code this thing and identify that thing and discriminate between this and that. It wasn't that. It was a much deeper sort of like, if they were walking away from this class, what is it that you really want? Like, take away all the academic language out of it. What is it that you really want? So I did that, and I took away the academic language. My second thing that I really wanted people to understand was, how do we see the world? How does the world see us? How do we engage in an interconnected relationship with people? Notice that this doesn't have any qualitative research language, any sort of theoretical language. There's a lot of theoretical stuff underneath it and all that stuff, but I wanted my students to have a framing that didn't require them to read a lot of philosophical stuff in advance to do the work, because I wanted to be a good ambassador of qualitative research, so that I keep it invitational to them, because it can be super intimidating to learn something new for the first time with language that feels like, English, but it's not really English that And then number three, the most important, not one of the other important points I wanted to think about was what stories rise to the surface, what stories remain uncovered, what stories are partially discovered, how do we decide to share our stories, how does translating other people's stories translate us, and how do we decide what to research. So that became like my third big sort of question to sit with. I think that was the third one, or is it the fourth one? Yeah. How do we see the world? How do we engage in interconnected relationship? And then the third one was probably the stories one. Yeah, the third one was stories. What stories rise to the surface and what remains uncovered. So that is in a nutshell, like where I started when I started unlearning. I'm like, what is my big thing that I want to walk away from? And then I started creating assignments and activities in class that wasn't just contingent on let's write academically, let's write, like there were assignments that were contingent on that, but those assignments themselves aren't like, not all assignments themselves were like, write me a paper, read this and write a response paper. So I had to change that pedagogy too. There were many different ways I can check people's understanding, I can check people's engagement, but I also wanted to make sure that my sort of activities in class wasn't where I'm just sitting there and talking at people, that they are having an embodied experiential activity, so that would allow them to have an understanding that they remember. So they will walk away and go, in qualitative class, I did this and I remember that. Because if you start having an embodied experience, it's a way better pedagogical tool than me lecturing at people and telling people whatever I need to tell. So with that being said, I'm going to stop lecturing over here, and I'm going to ask you to ask me question. What are your sort of burning question? Like, why are you here? What is it that you wanted to learn today that I can partner with you and help you think through it? So ask me a question, any question you like. Ask me anything you like. Do you all teach qualitative research classes? Like, Zoom hand up if you teach qualitative research classes. Okay, Donna teaches, Catherine teaches, Selena teaches, Varaxi teaches, Dina teaches. Awesome. All right. So talk to me. Ask me some questions. Tell me what is coming up for you. Tell me the stuck places, tell me your challenges, tell me whatever it is that you want to tell me. I'll partner with you and sort this out with you. One thing, as you're thinking about this, you can ask me question in the chat, or you can come on voice. One thing it's super important to know while you are teaching this is, what is your own framing of qualitative research? Like, what is it where do you locate yourself in qualitative research? So, qual research grows. What we understood in 1980s is not what we understand today. So qualitative research grows in leaps and bounds, really. So I try to have like articles that students can read that are current, but I also try to have like foundational pieces that, thank you, Donna, for that, foundational pieces that people have written that I think is important. So for example, we might be talking about the Balinese cockfight, and I will assign Balinese cockfight to people to read. but I will problematize that too, you know. So when we are doing the Balinese cockfight, you know, it's a really good piece to read in terms of people learning about interpretive writing, you know, because if you read the Balinese cockfight, you'd see how you might write up findings in qualitative research, you know. So I would teach them how to do that, like I would teach them how to think about that writing, but then we would actually discuss the content of that, you know. So like a Balinese cockfight is a super Western gaze on, you know, a ritual in Bali, and it's often like looked through with a Western gaze when sort of that level of sport where you are, you know, displaying some sort of masculinity, not unique to just Indonesia. You know, it's a patriarchy abounds everywhere. So then we would start like problematizing that. So I like to, when I am teaching a class, like we might start with like maybe just a little bit of an orientation of ideas and stuff. And then usually my students will go and do some activity together. And each time the activity is different. So that way, so when we do Balinese cockfight, the activity we do, at least I guide them in, is called like a press conference activity. So we have like sort of 3 to 4 different readings, and then I identify students that are like supposed to be experts on it. So like 3 to 4 people are expert on it, and then the rest of the class is press basically, and the class gets to ask question from that 3 to 4 people who are expert in that reading. It also ensures that people do the reading basically too, you know. So then they would be in the front and people would ask questions. And part of it is also, I like to bring a little bit of lightheartedness, humor, whimsy into it. So I would ask the expert to give their backstory as to how they became an expert on that topic for that article or for the chapter. So then folks will start giving me information, like they will make up backstories as to how they're an expert of Balinese cockfight or something, and they're making it up on the spot. And it's fun, you know, it's fun. We're doing serious work, but we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. We can have a little bit of fun. So they're like, well, I come to Bali all the time and I have been researching Balinese people for the last 15 years. Or they'll say stuff, it's completely not true. But, you know, because I've assigned them the role of an expert, you know, they will come up with whatever their backstory is. It's hilarious how that happens. I had like students who had like serious media skills, and they would create like podiums for press conference so we could like put it on the screen and people would have it. But what I noticed was that the task that I would give is everybody who is supposed to be an expert would have to take at least one question as the first one who takes that question, and then people would, you know, chime in and add in. So that put a little bit of like stake on folks so that you can't hide. You have to read and you have to respond. And so, but for one question, you're on your own. You have to lead the response first, you know. And so that, I swear by that activity, the whole class gets, you know, a little nervous, but not to the point, because there is no like grade anxiety. I'm not like, I'm taking points off if you didn't do it. So there is no grade anxiety attached to it, which I'm going to talk in a minute about grades, but there is no grade anxiety attached to it. So as a result, what ends up happening is, there's a little bit of you know, performance anxiety, but that ends up having like a really good sort of outcome, because folks read and come to class prepared, and we get deeper into discussions about things. And so usually, because it's like almost a 3-hour class, like the first half an hour to 45 minutes is for me to check in, do some didactic stuff, and then the rest of the time is activity oriented, you know, and debriefing and activity. There's a lot of time I offer to do debriefing where I am doing like where I am like processing the process. What did you learn? What worked for you? What is it that you have question about qualitative research. So, and I'm a contemplative practitioner, so I usually open up with a contemplative activity and I close with a contemplative activity as well. So there's sort of a structure of like, let's open this space up to make it a brave and safe space to do the work that we have come to do. Then we do the work, we process it, and then we close the space back up again. So I see a lot of different things have come up. I know you guys were thinking about it, so I'm going to ask. So I have a series of, Donna says, so I have a series of assignments where they have to look at self and reflect on self and use theory as a lens to deepen, but the struggle is real. Okay, so let me tell you the couple of different ways I have done that at the intro level, and maybe that would be helpful to you. So at the intro level, for theory, I have like a theory pechakucha. I make them do a pechakucha, which is like, I think like some number of slides for 6 seconds each slide, something I've forgotten, 20 slides, 6 seconds each slide. So I get them to like distill a theoretical framework that they're drawn to by just doing PowerPoint slides and talking over them for 6 seconds, and it's like 20 slides. It's something that it's easy for them to do. It's not that hard technologically. They all know how to do PowerPoint. It's not that hard to just click like a recorder while they're talking on the PowerPoint. So it's not too super hard. So that's the first one they do. Then we have a conversation about it, and then then they write like a more formal theory paper out of it. So that's one of the ways I try to navigate the distance folks feel from theory. But there's also another activity that I do that has been super powerful, and I actually ended up demonstrating that activity at a job talk, but then I declined the job, but I'll share that activity with you. So what I would do is I would put up like a paradigm chart, like interpretivism is this, critical theory is this, deconstructive stuff is this, and then I would divide folks into groups, and I would give them a task. So I would say like, work out a framework through all of these different, work out like, so I will say, if positivism could be a movie, what would it be? So I would give like something very regular, everyday kind of thing. So I would be like, if positivism would be a movie, what would they be? And on the screen, I would have the assumptions of positivism, assumptions of interpretivism, assumptions of critical qualitative work, assumptions of deconstructive qual work. So then I'd be like, if interpretivism was a movie, what would it be? If critical qualitative research or critical theory was a movie, what would it be? Or theories, or if deconstructivism was a movie, what would it be? So they would have to think about, a movie. Let's say for positivism, they would have to think about a movie where the movie is focused on like one truth, the only truth. How do we predict it, capture it, replicate it, that sort of stuff. So we would look at like documentaries, but it becomes super hard because they would come to positivism and go, but that's not really like, come on, it still has people's perspectives embedded in it. It's not just like an objective truth. So we get to deep discussion. So the juice is in the facilitation. Like, it's completely in the facilitation, because when somebody says that, you want to go there because somebody is super engaged. And so now you want to have that access point with which they opened up to you to say, I see that, I see you. So this is what my Black students taught me, you're not seeing me. So I see you. So now let's talk about this. I would say if a beverage was positivist, what would it be? So that one is easier for them, because they would be like, H2O, that is water. It is always water. H2O is water. And they found something that is like always this one thing, Interpretive one, like I also have TV show. You can pick any category. I had TV shows, famous people, drinks, food items, sports, whatever you want. So if a TV show was interpretivist, what would it be? So like the earlier on when I was teaching, folks would say like Jerry Springer show, because everybody has their own construct of reality and nobody's reality matches with anybody else's. This dates me a little bit, but they said that. If a TV show was deconstructive, what would it be? So sometimes people would talk, critical, what would it be? So that would be anything that looks at justice-oriented stuff, crimes, haves and have-nots. So they'll say like Law and Order, or the Jon Stewart show when Jon Stewart was on. So whatever that was that. Movies, if a movie was deconstructive, what would it be? So then folks would be like, well, it could be The Matrix because, the truth is always broken down, The Fight Club, and they will name other movies that I didn't know. One time I remember when I said, what if a drink could be critical, what would it be? And they would be like expensive drinks that we don't even know the names of, you know so when we start talking like that, we start bridging the gap between theory and our lived experiences, because they're not separate. We just have academic way of organizing some ideas and use some academic language to organize those ideas, but we don't have to we don't have to make it so that it is so different from us that, it requires some heavy intellectual lifting. It doesn't. It just requires us to just, open ourselves up to understanding how we see the world and how are we organizing our thinking around the world. So the other thing that I did, that really helped bring together the reflexive bit, Donna, that you were talking about, was I gave them a bag project. So the bag project is where they get like a paper bag, and basically they would have on one side of the bag, they would represent how they show up in the world, and on the other side, they would represent, what they hide from the world. And then inside the bag, they would put paraphernalias from critical milestones of their life that would reflect like accomplishments, privileges, challenges, all of that. And then they would have 5 minutes to do like a bag portrait performance demonstration, and it's usually the subjectivity, the positionality, but then using the same bag that I pair them up to do ethnography work with each other. It doesn't have to be like really intense. Just have the one person, both people will end up taking the role of researcher participant. So then just have one person be the researcher once, and then another person be the participant, and talk about what's in your bag. And then we participate. Then we practice different types of interview techniques. So first could be very elicited conversational one. Then we do things that are like more semi-structured, and you design some questions based on like what you have heard. And then the third one was like a phenomenological one, where you open with one and you just try to peel the layers off, so they get an experience of like trying different questions. So by the time we finish the class and we start doing some preliminary analysis of the data, their understanding of self in relationship to their research participant is very sophisticated. I didn't have to do it because they had that embodied experience. So they would worry about like, how much am I going to tell about this person out in the world for the class to consume? Has the class earned the right to know everything this person has told me? Because I developed this relationship with this person. The whole class didn't. I did. So no, you all are not ready for all the information they shared with me. So the sense of ethicality and self and reflexivity, it just was organic, because they're most people are decent, and they're coming in and they want to have this way of honoring another classmate. So it's not a nameless person that they disconnect with. This is still a classmate. So that ended up being a really good way for me to tie like a project that they started earlier, but then that project just keeps going because then they have data as their experiences. So that, Donna, is how I navigated the struggle, because it was a struggle. It was a super, super big struggle for that. Selena said, we often do not have enough time to engage in deep analytical discussions. I would love to hear from your experience and advice when you have taught the one or few qual courses. How did you support them with this, and what recommendations do you have for us? Selena, I would do like analytical exercises in class to demonstrate that, because when I say now you analyze, I go, I don't understand what that means. I don't understand what now we analyze means. So I would start giving them prompts. Like, so for example, we would start with like, let's say a scene. I can do a scene from like a YouTube scene, or like a static picture. And I would do a scene. And so like, here's the scene. That's your scene. And then I would ask them, what do they see? And it would become really easy to see that they're making interpretations. Like they'll say, I see this, but they're still making certain interpretations that it's not in the scene. It's from their experiences, their history, their location, and all of that. Like I will put a picture of Istanbul's, grand market, and they don't know that that is that market, or some might know, but most of them don't. And so they have to tell me what they're seeing, and they're making a whole host of assumptions of what they're seeing. So we start there, like, okay, let's start with what you see this, you describe what you see this, but then we go and we start saying, okay, why did you say this other thing? Okay, great. Then we start looking at like positionality and like, this is my perspective we're bringing in. Then we go deep in it and say like, okay, I'm going to try to show you like a video or a scene, and then I start getting them to think about it from a critical perspective, and will give them guidance. I'll give them like a prompt, for example, right? So I will give them a prompt, and I will say, in what way do you um, see the interactions that have gone on in the class equitable or not, let's say, and then we start talking about it, because they know how to analyze. They're just intimidated a lot of times about the academic language and the academic performance of it. It's the talent to think about something a little deeper than surface level that I think they bring, because we have to navigate our own lives that way. Like if we bypassed everything and we lived at the surface level superficially for our own lives, we would be a walking, talking hot mess, So we already know how to manage our lives by thinking like, oh, when this happens, it can also mean this, this, and this. We have those, touch points in our lives. So I just try to give options for them to breathe with the work, so that they don't feel like they have to tell me like some very theoretical terms when they're analyzing. I just usually will use movie clips, show clips, pictures to just start talking about it, so that it's not like their study. It's not like something they can mess up. It's not a relationship that's going to get messed up. So, and let me also point this out. I have, over the years, I have found like grading has become like a pain in the butt. And so I have taken out grading altogether. Now I understand there's a bunch of privilege attached to this, and not everybody can do that. And I acknowledge that. I sincerely acknowledge that. But I will tell you, pre-tenure, I was still doing a developmental sort of assessment where, they would I would give them assignment, like let's say for the first qual class, the output of the first qual class was, the duoethnography report, and then a draft of chapter 1. The reason I did the draft of chapter 1, because often I was the only one in the whole college having to take care of everybody's qualitative research needs. And then folks would get butthurt when they come for the proposal, and then they get all sorts of feedback from me, and they're like, wait, how come I didn't learn this in my coursework? Because coursework writing and proposal writing are very different exercises, and I hold you very differently when I'm reading your proposal as your advisor or methodologist versus when I'm reading your assignment in a class where you're handling a topic for the first time. So my reading of your assignment, where you're trying to wrap your head around a research purpose, is much more gentle versus when we are going to propose a study. That's when I'm going like serious, and I'm going, hey, look, this needs to not have this many vulnerabilities. We need to fix this, and depending on people's experiences, that landed well or it didn't land well. So I decided that the amount of time it was taking me to give feedback, where people were like receiving feedback for the first time, I'm like, let's move this process ahead. Let me get paid for this feedback that I offer, because I don't get paid for all the dissertation mentoring work that I do. So I said, okay, fine. So that was one of the things. But the components of a chapter 1 that is related to methodological stuff were the individual assignments, so I had like a research purpose and question as an assignment. Of course, the subjectivity was an assignment, theoretical framework was an assignment, so by the time they finish up each assignment, they do, and then they have an option to redo if they lost points. This is how I started before. I'm like, I am not taking points away. You have chance, you can regain the points. but I still triggered their understanding of who they are based on a letter or a number. Like folks have whole identities carved out based on letters and numbers. And that's just nonsense. People shouldn't have so much penalty driven way of figuring out their, scholarly identity, So I decided I'm going to change that. So I don't grade. I give them complete or incomplete. So they have I's or C's. The schema in their head says C is bad, but in my class, if you get a C, it's a really good thing. So it's meant to disorient and disrupt, prior programming. So then there are folks that are like super eager, but then how are you going to determine what grade I'm going to get? I'm like, 3 grades you're going to get, possibly A or an F or an I. A, if you complete all the assignments. No, I'm not coming for you in the final assignment to take points off. Complete all the assignments. Make sure you incorporate my feedback. The last assignment will have some points attached to it, but that takes me about 5 minutes to read a draft of chapter 1 because I've read probably like 80% of the document throughout the semester. So the little bit of new stuff that I would have, that's not going to take me that long to read, So usually my reading and grading takes me like 5 to 10 minutes at the end, And then I would, and the duoethnography one, they would have a presentation before they submit. So I will give them a lot of feedback in the presentation so they'll know what to write up in the submission. So everything, they have my eyes on it before I grade it. And every time I grade it, they have a chance to return back. So they get an A for that. If life happened and they couldn't do the work they needed to do, then it's an incomplete. And if they never submitted anything, that's an F. And I know never really have to give anybody an F. Usually people talk to me ahead of time, so I would not be able to be left in the dark to know what's happening. So that has really, and I would continuously remind them why I'm doing this. I don't want you to determine who you are as a learner based on a letter or number. I don't want you to think that learning should be paired with penalty. I want you to feel free to take risks. I want you to make mistakes, and I want you to know that there is no punishment attached. And also, I have had trouble with white folks, appreciating my authority in the classroom, and they keep wanting to argue with me over 1.3 point, and it's absolutely the worst use of all of our times. And I have folks of color who have had educational trauma, so sometimes they will see the feedback that I'm giving critically and wouldn't necessarily always know that that is coming from a place of love and care, and they might think that this is same stuff that they have experienced prior to that point. So it really took away all of that story that we bring to the space. I'm bringing my story, they're bringing their story in this great interaction between us, and it takes away that anxiety, and they still get a grade, they still get points, they still know what they're going to get. But my evals go up. Not that I ever teach to the evals, but my evals have gone up once I no longer have this power fight with them over grades. I'm like, take all the A's you want if you want. You just have to, incorporate my feedback. And if you do, that's great. I take pride in the fact that, folks that are going through my class are doing the work and actually excelling in it, and I'm holding them to that level of performance. I expect them to perform well, and which is the hardest part. When I'm like, no, just do the assignment, it's okay, you can redo again. Folks rise to that expectation. Like, okay, I will do my very best because she's not grading me to penalize me. She's just going to give me feedback. So I don't want to give like a really shitty piece of work. So let me rise to the occasion. So folks are like mostly rising to the occasion. So it's such a joy. It's a joy to teach. That's the best part of my job, is to teach. So Selena, I respond, Lauren, I'm going to be that single qual teaching teacher, that single qual course in my department next year. I wanted some guidance about how to navigate that. I locate myself well off the standard qual grid with new methodology, but I'm aware that I'll need to teach some qual basics. Yeah, that's a good question, Lauren. So I ended up teaching, initially I was teaching how I was taught, like these are the foundational pieces, you must read this, you must read this. Then I'm like, no. If you're going to give me one class and this is all I got with them, I need them to know decolonizing methodologies. I just need them to know. They can be really angry with me about this, but I need them to know about it. They can get all charged up because Linda Thuy Smith speaks very fiercely. Fine, read some decolonizing methodology. I want them to read Gloria Lutz-Billings' work on CRT and William Tate's work on CRT. I definitely want them to read that. I want them to read Gloria Anzaldua's work because that work helps understand philosophy and our place in the world and our calling to do the work that we do, and that a lot of us who do critical work need to really think about healing as a counterpart to criticality as well. And I want to bring that to the space. So what I started doing, Lauren, I started putting in the things that are absolutely non-negotiable for me, So I would front load my teaching with those, and I would, like, in the middle somewhere, I would do some of the more traditional stuff, but I would make sure I have exposed them to things that I most definitely want them to have their eyes on, so that varies, that mileage varies from person to person. And so because I have this bag project that I do with them, I end up doing analysis, a little bit of preliminary analysis. I don't tell them like this is like all the way that you're doing analysis. So I'll do some analysis, but the analysis is going to be like where you would have where I would do like more like a creative analysis and art space analysis first before I teach them how to do inductive analysis. So my goal is for them to understand that not everything needs to be coded. Not everything is an inductive analysis. And I want to expose them to other types of analysis just to be on their radar, just enough. So then when they would go to the analysis in inductive analysis, what ends up happening is that they understand how to weigh certain codes or categories because they have another type of analysis. So before, all the codes would have been like of equal importance, and they're like, no, I'm more gravitated towards this because I've done a different type of analysis before already. So that has been super interesting to see how it unfolds. So hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, okay, good. LaShawn says, two things which keep me invigorated in qual research is the integration of theory and positionality across the research process. I was always thinking and rethinking about how to do those two things well. Yeah. So the positionality for me worked out through the duoethnography project because they had their bags, they had prompts from me to think through their privileges when they are talking about critical milestones, so the positionality came through. And the theory one, I would work continuously with the students because it's a new terrain. So like once I would do like, if positivism was a movie or a drink, I would do that. But then, I would also like do movie clips and things and say like, what sorts of theoretical interpretation can you make out of this, And then that would allow folks to continuously work with theory, but I would just keep returning to it because it's a muscle folks have to build. So I would just keep returning to it so that I can show them like, hey, here's how we think theoretically, here's how we think with theory, here's how we do a theoretical analytical insight, here's how we do all of that. So that I would also bring that in when we're doing the preliminary analysis of stuff too. But we talk about it in terms of like just orientation and positionality, but also design. Like the design of the study is connected to your theory. The way you collect data is connected to your theory. The way you analyze is connected to your theory. The way you write it up is connected to your theory. So we would talk about it in each of those stages so that they never see theory as this standalone piece that they have to perform and then forget about it, instead of integrating it everywhere. Catherine says, how do you decide what's most important? I love reframing of this. I want my students to know that how I research isn't the only way, so I hesitate to teach only way of doing things in qual, but there's not enough time to do it all. How do you do what's more important or way to focus? Well, I focus on what I can teach well, so that's what I focus on. So I'm a creative, critical, decolonial researcher. So I focus on that, and I also make room for other stuff like interpretive stuff and other things as well. But I make sure that the thing that I know how to do well, they have some exposure from me, because that's obviously the access, right? Like, so if I have skills, I want to teach you the skills that I have, but I also want you to have a good survey of the field. Now I can't do all of it, of course, it's one class, so I can't do all of it. So I make a choice, what is feasible for them. What, like if they were to do dissertation, how can they use this information in that dissertation? So I make a choice based on that, um But how do I decide to focus is I decide through the big ideas I want them to walk away with. So if I have 3 to 4 big ideas I want them to walk away with, I focus on that. What would crystallize this big idea? What would crystallize this big idea? What would crystallize this big idea? And then like if I like one time I changed my course and I started teaching with a lot of readings that were like really in my wheelhouse, and folks really resonated and responded well to it the first semester. And so I ended up interviewing all of them to answer, like after the class ended, to understand like how the hell did like a group of 22 people all have positive response to something, like we also know that that's not always common. Like you can do like great teaching and people can still think that you suck or they might not resonate as much. So I was super curious about it, like what landed and why did it land so well for you. So that's how I do my discernment. I just start with like my big ideas, and then I start with readings that I want them to do, and then I start thinking like what is equitable. But I always make sure that for everything that I am doing a reading of, that I don't just present it from a monolithic perspective. Like I would bring in multiple perspective, I would bring in critique, I would bring in a diversity of perspective, diversity of scholars. I would consciously walk away from some of the canon that is used, in favor of books or articles or book chapters by folks that write from multiple different positionalities, just so that they walk away with a more comprehensive understanding as opposed to like an expected understanding. Because it's still unpacking my prejudice, being brought up a positivist, now interested in post-qualitative work. What does post-qualitative work mean to you? It means absolutely nothing to me. Where is Nicola? Nicola, are you here? Oh, there. Nicola, post-qual means absolutely nothing. It means zero things to me. I am on recording. This will probably get me in trouble, but that's okay. I have written about it. I have also have an article in QI that I've said I've positioned myself as a self-imposed exile. I know I do not teach post-qual because I don't know what the hell post-qual is. And I know that people in post-qual won't even define what post-qual is because they don't want to define what post-qual is. The, the thing is, when I was an undergrad, Betty St. Pierre and Patty Lather were creating these paradigm charts in qualitative research. And then Betty St. Pierre had like, Patty had like the positivist, interpretivist, critical, deconstructivist, and then they had like a post question mark chart. So this was, I'm talking like in the early 2000s. So they had a post question mark chart. They mostly work with postmodern theorists. So they work with like Deleuze, Guattari, Nietzsche, Foucault, those people. They work with them. What's that guy's name who wrote Off Grammatology? Tell me the name. Spivak translated their work. Tell me, somebody tell me, please. I'm gonna have to go look at it right now. Derrida. Okay. God, I forgot Derrida. All right. Okay. So they were doing that work. And so while they were doing that work, they wanted to have a critique of traditional qual using post theories, which is fine. Critique your life away if you want, So they wanted to critique traditional qual using post theories, which is fine. But by the time, and they also wanted us to think with theory, which is also fine because anybody worth their salt in any research is going to think with theory. It's like, it's not a new idea. Everybody thinks with theory, like we all think with theory. The theories we think with aren't the theories of continental philosophers. A lot of us think with, our theorizations done from our mothers, grandmothers, our cosmologies, our inheritances. We think with a lot of other theorizations that are not like Western privileged. So we do think with theory. We just sometimes don't have academic language for it. Or sometimes we have academic language like a Gloria Anzaldúa, like a Bell Hooks, like a Du Bois, but that's not listed into the post-qual theories, that we go for. So I was already thinking with theories, and I was already doing my work with both theoretical thinking and multiplicity and avoiding essentialization and all of those things, um, and refusal of certain methodological moves too. I was avoiding some of that as well. However, you know, the thing is, I didn't understand exactly what post-qual is supposed to do that I can do with the work that I do, because I really don't need to think with Barad, or I don't need to think with Barad to understand that things are interconnected. I literally don't. I grew up in a country where from the moment of my conscious awareness, I understood things were interconnected due to cultural practices and wisdom traditions. Barad didn't need to tell me that. I have a contemplative practice that honors the interconnectivity of every last molecule on Earth. So I didn't need Barad, so I don't know how to teach this sincerely. Because if you tell me, like, teach your students how to think with theory, I do that. If you tell me teach your students methodological diversity, I do that. If you tell me teach your students analytical diversity, I do that. If you tell me teach your students to refuse and break some rules methodologically, I do that. So I don't know. I honestly don't have anything that I can teach of post-qual that I can teach with conviction, so I don't. Do they learn or do they read about Derrida, Foucault, Deleuze if it's relevant for their work? Sure, but it's not positioned in opposition to anything, like it's not positioned like I am better than you. I am now in this binary discussion between my critique is better than humanistic research, or whatever else that you want to break down to prove yourself better because you are more sophisticated and more nuanced and more high theory and more everything. And I just decided I'm not playing that game. I mean, I'm not playing that game because ethically I'm not congruent with that. I mean, I'm all about break shit down. Yes, break shit down, but colonization and colonizers have taught us to go into different places and break things down, but who repairs things, who heals things? So I am very committed to having the other side of the conversation, is what do we do after we create this wreckage, of whatever that we want to break down? What do we do next? And I don't find that post-qual folks answer that question. They just want to break things apart. But the creation of different things and healing and possibilities, it's just everybody's afraid to articulate it in a crystallized way in that space. So I'm kind of like, you guys do you. And most of that space also looks predominantly white too. So just the people who are picking up the work, the people who are citing that work, is predominantly white folks citing each other. So again, it's really hard to understand, like, if I enter that space, I'm still in the margin of that space too. So I really have nothing to benefit from that space or that discourse to integrate into my work, So the theories I work with aren't those people, that I work with. But if I have had a person do a brilliant counselor ed dissertation and used Deleuze's Body Without a Body as a framework to do that work. And I supported him all the way, because my goal is that by the time I finish teaching, my dissertation's dissertation should not look like a mini me version of me. It should look like it has huge methodological diversity, topical diversity, because I don't want it to be where, I'm only going to support you if you think and do things my way. I want to support the students' personal interest and passion. But I also have to be honest with the student, like, hey, if that is something you really want to do, let's talk. Let me see how I plug myself in. And if I can't, I'll recommend somebody else. So sorry, you asked me a question for which I have a whole article on it. Is there a framework we can use in touring for narrative inquiry? I would say, think about narrative inquiry as storytelling from different cultural perspectives, and then use a cultural framework. I'm working with that right now with my own community. And so many communities have storytelling frameworks. So I would say use that if you have. Otherwise, I would say Jung-Hee Kim's book of Understanding Narrative Inquiry is possibly one of the best comprehensive texts that is out there. She's writing a theory book after this, which will be super accessible. I can't wait. Donna, I have taught qualitative research methods to public health students, which represents its own separate issues. Yes, I've had public health students in my class. I taught a critical health equity lens, which sometimes is in tension with how they taught. Yeah. And a lot of times, like my criticality, I may be the only person they're hearing these things from, and nobody else is telling them this. So sometimes I have been the lone voice of it. So I hear you. How do students respond to contemplative? They respond super well. So where's Donna? Donna Smith. Wave. Okay, hi Donna. They respond super well. I started it when I was teaching in Corpus Christi, and I was like, I don't know. So when I first started it, and I had students that were like coming in, and I had a school principal who came in, and she was super stressed with all the assignments and everything. And she was like, I'm so stressed. And her energy was very powerful, very influential. You know, like when somebody says something, like she can rile up all the other people, like she's a natural leader. So she was riling up everybody else. And the folks who didn't do the work just wanted to ride on that frustration and say, yeah, that's why I didn't do the work. You know, in the meantime, she did the work, but she was just still, trying to, say how frustrated she was. So anyway, so then when everybody else said got on the bandwagon, I said, okay, we're gonna pause, because I didn't want the space to be filled up with that energy. I wanted them to think in terms of possibilities, and not in terms of like, oh, everything sucks. So I did a guided visual meditation for them to imagine the day that they're defending their dissertation, and how it feels, and how people are really being very congratulatory of them, and they were like in happy place. And then I was bringing them back, and they're like, why did you bring us back? And we were in a happy place. And then, the next time I came to class, they said, are we not going to do the meditation thing again? So I'm like, okay, like I'm still like worried. I'm in Corpus Christi. I don't know if they're gonna think I'm gonna make them witches or gay or something. I don't know. Like people have such weird connotations about, meditations, contemplative practices and stuff. So I was kind of hesitant, but the more I owned it, the more they were comfortable with it. And I always give them options. So I would just say like things that, like, engage with it as you can. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. Just take this next few moments to just gather yourself so you can arrive to do the work that we need to do. And that's all I would say. And then if they don't want to participate, it's fine. It's fine. But there are folks that want to participate. And now I have students who would be like, hey, you forgot to do the contemplative practice. Like they will check me if I don't. So now it's kind of like a known thing. That's what she does. That's what you do in Bhattacharya's class. Yolanda says, for Doctor, I just want to go through all the messages just because I asked you to ask me questions. So I want to at least answer all your questions. So for doctoral students conducting action research projects, what are some helpful approach, organized methods when analyzing and coding qualitative interviews data based on research questions while creating themes? I wouldn't say that the process of analysis would be any different from action research than any other action research, especially if you're doing inductive analysis through codes and themes. I would, go to the bank with Johnny Saldania's coding manual on that, because that's a really good book. Sharma's has a really good book as well. She's, although people don't have to do grounded theory, but there's some really good conversations that Sharma's has written that are on like how to do line by line coding, how to do memoing and all of that. And she breaks that down. But Johnny does a really good job of breaking down like the process, So I would go with Johnny's work, and he has beautiful exercises in there to work with that. So I would recommend that. Nalini, good example of paradigms. Thank you. One of my colleagues used the concept of love to go through the various paradigms. Yeah, awesome. It must be for no more grading. No more grading. I grade this way in my classes. I started about 2 years ago, and it became a game. Students can breathe and learn. Yes. So by the time they come to the middle or the late semester, I'm like, where's your anxiety? Where's your anxiety? We're anxious to give you the assignments, but we're not grade anxious. They're anxious that they want to perform to whatever they think my expectation is, but they're not grade anxious. Consistent ease to students with the belief we had to apply. It was transmuting for all of you. Yeah. The paper you've written on teaching qualitative research that we can cite? Yes. What I'm going to do is I'll put a list of that. But I would say if you want to go right away, to that, Nicola, go to my ResearchGate page, And in my ResearchGate page, you're going to have certain qualitative research pieces that I have written. And a lot of this work and back portrait work and all of that is already published. So you can go to ResearchGate and you'll find the articles. Derrida, thank you, people, for helping me with that. Bert, Dr. Bert. I used an article where a British author analyzed news articles about Meghan and Kate to discuss qualitative research. Students are amazed to see the differences in language when with each princess had it been described. I also add that race appears to be an issue, but as an African American woman, I don't have a broad knowledge or understanding of the British experiences. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, existing data. So there's a place that I go to a lot. I'm going to type it over there. It's called densho.org. So it's like a repository of photos, transcripts, interviews from people who had been in the Japanese internment camp. And I often find myself teaching in predominantly white spaces. So I try to bring in as much critical perspectives as I want to bring in, because I want people to understand that these ways of looking at inequities in the world is not for like, you know, one group of people. It's all of our responsibility because it's happening in our watch, you know, it's happening while we have been on earth or our parents have been on earth, you know, and we bear witness to it in some form or another. So I would bring densho.org, and there's all these people who have been through the Japanese internment camp, and they would talk about those experiences, and we would have a lot of deep discussions. So like I said, the juice is in facilitation. So we would talk about that, but then we would relate it to like other times, other moments, their studies, all of these other things, and we create a lot of generative work through that. So that is what I would do. Thank you, everyone. So what I want to do before we go, because, you know, this is what I said, I do close the circle. Tell me a little bit about what landed for you. Like, was this helpful? Did you learn something, or was it just an hour chilling with me? Which is also fine if you just chilled with me, but it's good information for me to know. So tell me if you did. I'm going to put 2 links out here for you to look at it if you want to. One is Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee gives me some money to put away for my nonprofit, which is an educational nonprofit that I want to create, that will fund multiply minoritized graduate students and faculty's research, and is going to have educational programming. So Buy Me a Coffee will do that. If you're interested in my mentoring program, just click on that link, and then that'll give you the mentoring program. I guess the Buy Me a Coffee link is like not working as a link, so let me type that separately. Okay, so you don't feel so lonely now. That's good, Donna. I feel freed from the post-qualitative. Okay, let's put it this way. I'm not going to knock the scholars who do post-qualitative work, because I don't want to knock anybody else's time and labor. I'm just going to say that from my perspective, it doesn't offer anything new. And I feel a lot of times it also erases existing knowledge systems as well, like indigenous knowledge system, Black African knowledge system, Asian knowledge system, you know, a lot of knowledge system. And so it just takes a lot of GRE words and says a lot of things that we have known for a really long time that predates Western civilization. So I don't know how to engage with something that was like the most basic awareness when I started having awareness of this world, you know. And so for people that it is helpful, then it's helpful, you know, like I'm not going to knock that. But for me, it's not. And so I don't know how to negotiate that terrain. So I'm not in that terrain. I've given myself a self-imposed exile from that. Okay. Then over here. Great anxiety is real. I'm feeling the same. The backburner assignment was awesome. Thank you. Great anxiety solutions was powerful for me. Yeah. So I don't grade at all anymore. So I just give feedback, and I put a lot of labor in the front end of the class to give feedback and pour into them, so that by the middle and the end, they have a sense of like what I'm expecting, you know, and so then they know. And so I hold them accountable, like very highly accountable. It's just, I just don't punish them. If they didn't get it right the first time, I just don't punish them. I just don't take points away from them. What's the point? You know, like it just creates a lot of like negative feelings. People spiral down into depression. They bring all their stories with them, and the not enoughness becomes like really loud in their head. You know, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I love the different activities, Varaxi said. I love the different activities suggesting for teachers. I will thank you. Of course, Varaxi. Anthea said, very useful way of thinking about how to take away from some of the stresses the students feel for the research for the first time. Been looking to ungrading, so it was good to hear grading solutions. Yes, this will have someone who wants to go in the job market soon. Excellent, Denisha. Absolutely, thank you. I learned a lot. Some activity and I can use it. I mainly teach online. I'm interested in using gamification in a qual course I want to build online. Awesome, awesome. That's very cool. When you do it, let me know. And better off, please publish it so that we can all use it. Absolutely, Denisha. This has been so wonderfully helpful, Carrie. I'm even more excited to teach golf for the first time. Awesome. You're pondering this great technique. Yeah, no administrator has come after me on this. They come after you, at least in places where I've worked. They'll come after you if you have treated anybody differently than anybody else, But if it's the same thing that applies to everyone, then I haven't had any. As long as I've been clear on my syllabus, we're good. I felt the same about postcard for some time now, Crystal. Like the creative ways in which you should write a book with this kind of this. I know people have been telling me to write a book on all of these things. This is why I said there's not enough time for me to share everything I know, so I'm going to just share it, and I'm going to inspire you to see like what you want to do with it. And then if you still want to work with me and want to come and join my community, you're welcome to snoop around and see what it is, and I can get on the phone with you and tell you more about it. But I want to still share, just because there's so much to share still. Bhattacharya, I don't know who you are, but I think you know me or I know you. We're not related. I don't think we are. I missed a part. My bad. Forgot time zone difference, but we'll watch the recording. Present research decolonizing knowledge, and we're using our articles and decolonizing research method as a blueprint. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Donna, activities discussed were helpful. Also learned some tea. I never heard. Yes, that is the tea. This is why I have to put myself on exile, because when they were coming up with this, I still did my dissertation without the post-qual label. So then I'm like, what do I need the label for? Why are a bunch of people who are so opposed to coding code themselves under this label? I don't understand that. It just felt like the thing that eats itself. It felt super cannibalistic. I'm like, do people not see the contradiction? They want to decenter the human, but they're essentializing human as one monolithic group. Humans are not even treated as humans. Some group of humans are not treated as human. Do you want to know like the horrible thing that happened yesterday? I was mentoring a Black student, and I forgot the name of Tamir Rice, because we were gonna put that there. I said, so we were talking about adultification of young Black bodies and lives, basically. So I'm like, yes, they adultified Tamir Rice, but except I forgot Tamir Rice's name. So I tried to go on Google, and I said Black boy shot, and Google gave me, when you try to type, and Google gives you like options of most frequently typed things, Black boy shot, and most frequent. You try this, it'll say 60 times, 90 times. And I was like so upset seeing that, and then having to make my student watch that and bear witness, because I was sharing screen when I was trying to recall the name. So when a group of people are not even considered human, what the hell do you want to decenter them some more for? I've directly asked this to Patty Lather, this question. I haven't got a satisfying answer. So I can't, my spirit, my ethics, I just can't line up with this thinking unless you nuance it more, unless you complicate it a little bit more. But if you all want to gather around this one label as a code, good, happy coding. I'm just not part of it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that the work doesn't matter. The work matters for those who are doing the work and how they do it. I'm just saying I don't have an entry point. So that's why I had to go put myself on exile from that. Dina, having 3 main areas to frame the course is very helpful. Feel relieved that others have similar questions. What is your gradebook? My gradebook is incomplete and complete. Under each assignment, there's incomplete and complete. That's all it looks. And here's one more thing, one more tip on feedback that I want to share with you. I don't take time to offer feedback at the end of the semester. I just don't, because lots of people do not read it. Like, so why am I spending long hours at the end of the semester when I am wiped out trying to give detailed feedback that folks are not going to read? So what I do instead is I say, I'm going to give you broad global feedback, but my relationship with you doesn't end just because a semester has ended. I am partnered with you, so why don't you make an appointment with me when the semester starts? And if you want detailed feedback, I will give you feedback and give you opportunity to ask me question in real time. So that is a very juicy offer, and I make that offer. So then all I do when I'm grading is I'm looking to see, have they all completed? Did they address my feedback? And the new portion of things they submit is so little that it doesn't take me that long to grade. And nobody would perform as badly to lose 10% points. That just doesn't happen. If I've guided them well by that point, they're not going to lose 10% points. So very rarely anybody is getting anything other than B, and folks that get other than an A, and folks that get an A often don't care about feedback. A lot of people don't care about feedback. This is from prior giving tons of feedback. So I do give feedback, but come back in the following semester, make an appointment, and then we will talk. And then, so from 22 students, maybe 2 students will come, and I will give generous feedback at that point and give them a chance to ask. And it's much more meaningful, but I'll make them know that in advance, like there's nothing is a secret. I learned incest by grading anxiety students adapting to it. Yes. Okay. Diane said, thank you for sharing so freely. I'm grateful for especially focus on the diverse perspectives. Yeah, I love all of this. Thank you so much. Okay, of course. And always, Nalini said, thank you, always inspired. Awesome. Arundhati. Hey, Arundhati. I couldn't tell. Thank you, Arundhati. Ronisha is here. I'm a person who looks for feedback, felt deep disappointed due to lack of feedback from professors. Ronisha, if you were in my class and you said you needed feedback because you had proposals to submit or something, if somebody were to let me know that, then then you get feedback. I'm so sorry you have to go. No problem. We appreciate that you let them know that you're off, and I know you would. Okay. All right, everyone. I am out. We got a little bit over, but it was fun talking to you all. I will post this on Facebook, and I will also post a link to my ResearchGate. So if you want to download any articles that I have written about teaching qual, it will be there. Thank you all.